Sophie Cunningham has never been one to bite her tongue, and Caitlin Clark isn't afraid to speak her mind either. So after Indiana suffered a crushing 113-96 defeat to Atlanta, all eyes turned to the post-game press conference. The atmosphere changed instantly when both players began addressing questions about head coach Stephanie White, who was sitting just a few feet away. Their comments weren't vague, and the tension in the room was impossible to ignore. But to understand why emotions reached that point, you have to look at everything that unfolded over those 40 minutes on the floor. The game itself tells the story of how frustration built up and why Clark and Cunningham appeared to reach their breaking point. What do you think the Fever need to change to get back to winning games? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.
Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark nearly fights every single game at this point. You will never see this on any level of basketball. But let's watch this. Like look, she's rolling her eyes already. Look at this. Like she's tired of you, Stephanie. I'm sorry, but she's tired of you. This is not good. At any point, this is not good. She's rolling her eyes, looking up at the scoreboard. Stephanie, you think you know what you're talking about, and you don't have a single clue.
Caitlin Clark came out on fire in the opening quarter, pouring in 13 points while knocking down 5 of her 6 shots, including 3 shots from beyond the arc. Everything looked effortless, and the kind of rhythm she was in should have every team in the WNBA paying attention. Indiana exploded for 39 points in the first quarter, their highest scoring opening period of the season, and built an 11-point lead at one stage. Atlanta simply had no answer for the Fever's offense, and it looked like Indiana was in complete control.
Indiana Fever were just decimated by the Atlanta Dream. Absolutely decimated after Caitlin Clark with a historic first quarter. A historic first quarter. She dropped 13 points in the first quarter. I mean, just look at this. 13 points in the first quarter. 5 for 6 from the field. 3 for 4 from the three-point. She's the GOAT.
What made Indiana's start so dangerous wasn't just Caitlin Clark's ability to score. It was the way she was reading the floor. Whenever Atlanta sent extra defenders her way, she recognized it immediately and moved the ball before the trap could even take effect. Whether it was finding a teammate cutting to the basket, delivering a perfect pass in rhythm, or pushing the tempo before the Dream could get set defensively, Clark was always one step ahead. She attacked through contact, ignited fast breaks, and orchestrated the offense with complete confidence. There was no hesitation in her game, only control. For much of that first stretch, Indiana looked like a team capable of taking down anyone in the league, and it all stemmed from Clark setting the tone and dictating the action from the opening tip.
This is her. She was smiling at the end of the first quarter. You know what I'm saying? Happy as hell, hitting threes. Look at the defenders' faces looking like they was on the verge of crying, on the verge of tears. Terrified of this girl. Terrified that she was on pace to drop 52 points tonight, chat. 52 points. 13 points a quarter. And mind you, I don't even think she was done by that point. But this is Caitlin Clark, man. This is who Stephanie White wants to continuously take away from the ball.
Atlanta never really found an answer for Caitlin Clark. There wasn't some defensive adjustment or brilliant coaching move that suddenly shut her down. Indiana's offense kept humming, the Dream kept getting burned, and the Fever looked firmly in control for most of the night. By the time the third quarter was underway, Clark had already piled up 19 points and 5 assists while committing just 2 turnovers, and she was attacking with the same confidence and intensity she showed from the opening possession. Then came a moment that changed everything. With 8:41 remaining in the third, immediately following a foul by Monique Billings on Jordan Canada, head coach Stephanie White called Clark to the bench and appeared to have a heated conversation with her on the sideline. Indiana still held a 5-point lead, and Clark was clearly in rhythm. There was no sign of an injury, no foul trouble, and nothing obvious to suggest that taking out your hottest player in the middle of a tight game made sense. But Clark was sent to the bench anyway, and that's when the entire game flipped. Atlanta ripped off a stunning 13-0 run, completely seizing momentum before the fourth quarter even arrived. The Fever were overwhelmed in the third period, getting outscored 28-5, and the comfortable advantage they had spent so much time building disappeared in a matter of minutes.
Look right here, Caitlin's arguing with the coaching staff. She's trying to talk. I see she was talking to Austin Kelly right here. Once again, staff, So instead of going straight to Stephanie White, and what is Stephanie White doing looking away from Caitlin Clark? Now, habits told me one thing, is that whenever Stephanie White looks away from Caitlin Clark while Caitlin is looking at Stephanie or approaching Stephanie, that usually means that Stephanie White was wrong.
The group Stephanie White put on the floor after taking Caitlin Clark out didn't provide better spacing or create any favorable matchups. Instead, Atlanta's front court began controlling the boards, taking advantage of a size edge that Indiana simply couldn't counter with that lineup. On the other end, the offense lost its rhythm almost instantly because the player responsible for creating most of the opportunities was sitting on the bench. White continued to lean on a three-guard lineup, but rather than generating an advantage, it seemed to create more problems. Atlanta recognized it immediately and capitalized on the confusion every chance it got. White has often spoken about her 3A's approach: awareness, anticipation, and defense. On paper, those principles sound perfectly reasonable. But that style is built for a slower, defense-first team that wins by grinding opponents down. Indiana's roster, however, features Caitlin Clark, one of the most explosive offensive players in the league. Based on the pace she set in the opening quarter, she was on track for a massive scoring night if that efficiency had continued. When your point guard scores 13 points in the first 12 minutes while consistently making the right decisions with the ball, the priority isn't slowing things down or overmanaging rotations. It's finding ways to maximize the impact of a player who is clearly dictating the game and putting constant pressure on the defense.
Whenever Caitlin Clark is looking at Stephanie White to say, "I told you so," Stephanie White can never make eye contact with her. Caitlin Clark is always voicing her opinions to Austin Kelly because Stephanie White won't.
From the bench, Caitlin Clark could only watch as Atlanta grabbed control of the game while Stephanie White continued to roll out combinations that didn't seem to be helping Indiana in a contest that was still very much within reach. Clark's frustration wasn't difficult to spot. Her body language told the story. She finished with 26 points and 7 assists, numbers that would qualify as an incredible performance for most players. But it felt like those stats came in spite of the rotation decisions rather than because of them. Indiana also put itself in trouble with foul issues. The Fever were whistled for 29 fouls, giving Atlanta plenty of opportunities at the line. The Dream ended up attempting 31 free throws compared to Indiana's 21, a 10-shot advantage that played a major role in the outcome. Whether you agreed with the officiating or not, the whistles consistently favored one side throughout the night, and those extra trips to the stripe helped Atlanta steadily widen the gap. Instead of one big turning point, the margin grew possession by possession, with every foul call adding to the damage.
They called foul after foul after foul after foul when nobody was getting touched. But when Caitlin Clark did that same drive to the hole and was getting hit all game, they didn't call that foul. When Kelsey Mitchell goes up for a layup and is getting pulled from behind, her hand hits Ryan Howard in the face and she gets a technical. But when Angel Reese goes up for a layup and elbows somebody for the third time in 2 games, no upgrade on Angel.
Aaliyah Boston's foul trouble ended up affecting far more than just Indiana's defense. It completely disrupted the team's overall approach. She picked up her 3rd foul before halftime, forcing her to play much more carefully in the second quarter when the Fever really needed her to be assertive and physical. By the end of the night, Boston had accumulated 5 fouls and logged only 22 minutes, and once that 5th whistle came late in the 3rd quarter, the game quickly started slipping away. Boston is Indiana's most reliable presence inside, the one player with the size and toughness to match Atlanta's front court. With her spending extended stretches on the bench, the Dream's bigs began taking over because the Fever simply didn't have another answer in the paint. What frustrated many observers even more was Stephanie White's decision not to use a challenge on Boston's 5th foul. To a lot of people watching, the contact appeared minimal and far from obvious. In a game where Atlanta was already controlling the interior, allowing your best post defender to remain saddled with 5 fouls without even attempting to overturn the call raised plenty of questions. Instead of trying to protect one of the team's most important players, Indiana left the paint exposed, and Atlanta took advantage of it throughout much of the 4th quarter.
Oh. I mean, there's a push,
but that feels like the kind of contact that happens.
Completely incidental.
It happens.
As the night went on, a pattern seemed to emerge in the way the game was being officiated. Time after time, Caitlin Clark attacked the basket, absorbed contact from Atlanta defenders, and play continued without a whistle. Meanwhile, on the other end, even light contact against Atlanta's guards often resulted in fouls being called against Indiana. Throughout the game, Atlanta's players were able to play with a high level of physicality, using their bodies to fight for position and disrupt Indiana's shooters. Yet whenever the Fever responded with similar intensity on defense, the whistles appeared to come much quicker. That contrast became a growing source of frustration. Angel Reese, in particular, played one of her most aggressive games of the season, battling relentlessly on the boards and inside the paint. Her physical style was effective and often rewarded, but many watching felt that when Indiana tried to match that same level of toughness, the standards seemed different. Whether fair or not, the inconsistency in how contact was being called became one of the biggest talking points of the night.
Watch this film, and I'm going to show you how the double standard is crazy. But both players hit Caitlin Clark's arms. She comes through and still makes the bucket. And then Angel Reese has something to say. Always. Like, she annoys me. Caitlin Clark hits a three. I think that's the most open she's been the entire season. And look at, here's a moving screen. Do you see how she moves her leg out to get that screen on Caitlin Clark? That's an illegal.
By the end of the night, the officials had called a combined 53 fouls, and the imbalance between the two sides became impossible to ignore. As the second half wore on, Indiana's players appeared to be walking on eggshells, fully aware that another whistle could quickly land them on the bench. That kind of pressure affects everything, from how aggressively you defend to whether you're willing to fight through screens, contest shots, or sacrifice your body to draw a charge. Meanwhile, Atlanta seemed able to maintain the same level of physicality without dealing with the same concerns. They played freely and aggressively, while Indiana often looked hesitant, knowing that even one more foul could have major consequences. That difference in mindset had a noticeable impact on the flow and intensity of the game.
It's crazy. That was the first one I was just like, how's that a foul? Because watch this, Caitlin Clark's being held. 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds. Remember that, because you're about to see a whole bunch of ghost fouls. There's another one, Sophie Cunningham. Every single play, we're trying to build a lead, but we can't because the refs stop the game every single second.
The result was a fourth quarter where Indiana struggled to apply any real defensive pressure. Aaliyah Boston was spending valuable minutes on the bench, and many felt Stephanie White had done little to protect her from foul trouble. At the same time, the Fever never seemed to get their strongest lineup on the floor together for an extended stretch. Some of that came from the rotation choices, and some of it stemmed from the constant foul issues that had been building throughout the game. From the outside, the broadcast portrayed the loss as a hard-fought game that simply slipped away in the closing stages. But a closer look at the numbers tells a more complicated story. Atlanta finished with 31 free throw attempts compared to Indiana's 21, creating a significant gap at the line. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark poured in 26 points, despite repeatedly attacking the paint and absorbing contact without earning many trips to the stripe. On several drives, she took bumps that many believed would have resulted in free throws had the same plays occurred on the other end of the court.
I think she fell down 5 times. Look at that, she wasn't even touched. The same one that got us last game for falling down every single play.
Despite the questionable whistles and the timing of Stephanie White's decisions, Indiana also played a role in its own downfall. Not every problem came from officiating or coaching. The Fever had opportunities to steady themselves, but mistakes and missed chances continued to pile up. And perhaps most frustrating of all, some of those setbacks came from players who were expected to help turn the game around rather than contribute to the collapse.
Green from Hines Allen. Clark draws 2. Finds the cutter. It's Boston center the lane for the soft finish.
Now, let's focus on Aaliyah Boston, because she had several missed opportunities that proved costly. These weren't heavily contested shots or difficult finishes through traffic. They were clean looks near the basket, the kinds of chances a player of her caliber is expected to convert. A few point-blank misses inside turned into transition opportunities for Atlanta, allowing the Dream to gain momentum the other way. Boston remains one of the league's top post players when she's playing confidently and getting into a rhythm. That's why the struggles around the basket stood out. It didn't look like a question of talent. If anything, it raised questions about whether she was being put in the best position to succeed and whether the flow of the offense was allowing her to play at her usual level.
Mitchell with a beautiful shot and drain. Mitchell and the way she can dance with the basketball, that time behind her back, pow pow.
Kelsey Mitchell finished with 16 points, but the box score doesn't fully explain how uneven her night really was. She was aggressive in the second quarter, putting up 7 shots in that period alone, more than any other Fever player managed in a single quarter all game. The issue was that several of those attempts came during possessions where Caitlin Clark had already identified openings and was in position to orchestrate the offense. Lexi Hull and Monique Billings also deserve mention, especially considering both received significant contracts during the offseason. Hull struggled to find any offensive rhythm throughout the night and rarely forced Atlanta's defense to react. Billings got into foul trouble early, limiting her minutes and preventing her from making much of an impact before spending extended stretches on the bench. When Indiana needed contributions across the roster, 2 important role players combined for very little, and those missing pieces became increasingly noticeable as the game slipped away.
Important for them to have the willingness to take them.
Clark draws 2, finds Cunningham, her 3, and it's good.
One bright spot for Indiana came from the bench, where a few players actually provided a spark. Sophie Cunningham, in particular, made her presence felt, finishing with 13 points while knocking down 3 of her 8 attempts from beyond the arc. But her impact went far beyond the stat sheet. She brought a level of toughness and intensity that the starting unit struggled to maintain for much of the night. Whether it was battling on defense, hustling for loose balls, or bringing energy on every possession, Cunningham consistently played with urgency. Even as the game started to slip away, she gave the Fever a much-needed boost and provided the kind of effort the team desperately needed.
Billings gives it up. Hull flags it down. Clark coming back to it. Circling, dishing, Hines Allen hitting on the jumper.
While Indiana's starters struggled to make an impact, several reserve players stepped up and provided much-needed production. Maya Caldwell-Hines Allen brought physicality inside and was able to finish around the rim in situations where Aaliyah Boston had difficulty. Despite dealing with foul trouble, Raven Johnson helped stabilize the offense, pushed the tempo, and made smart plays that kept the Fever from completely unraveling during some rough stretches. People watching the broadcast noticed it immediately. Some observers described her as looking deeply frustrated, while others pointed to her expressions and body language, saying she appeared to be replaying everything that had gone wrong and struggling to hide her disappointment over how the night had unfolded.
That this was weird. This is weird. I'll say this. That this was like one of these moments where it's like Caitlin looked kind of done. Caitlin just looked done with whatever Steph White said to her. This is like a what the fuck? No way.
Caitlin Clark never raised her voice or made a scene. She handled the moment with composure, but the message behind her comments was hard to miss. Reflecting on the game, she pointed to Indiana's ball movement and pace in the first half, explaining that the team had been successful by getting out in transition, sharing the ball, and consistently creating open looks. She never directly criticized Stephanie White, nor did she mention any specific decisions, but those listening closely could understand the frustration behind her words. The style of basketball that had fueled Indiana's early success disappeared in the second half, and Clark's comments made it clear that she believed the team had moved away from what was working. She didn't have to point fingers for the message to come across. Everyone in the room could sense that she was no longer interested in pretending nothing had changed.
What we did well in the first half was play in transition, spray, find open people, and then it's really hard to do that when all we do is foul and they score. Like, we didn't play in transition at all in the second half because of that.
Sophie Cunningham echoed many of the same themes, but she delivered them in a much more straightforward way. While Caitlin Clark remained composed and carefully chose her words, Cunningham focused on effort, competitiveness, and what it truly takes for this team to win. As she spoke, the mood in the room noticeably changed. There was less of the usual post-game diplomacy and more of a sense that real frustrations were beginning to surface. And that's why the stakes feel so high. Indiana has a legitimate opportunity to build something special. Clark is performing at a level that puts her among the league's elite, and the roster has enough talent to compete if everything comes together. But maximizing those strengths requires building around what makes this team dangerous, rather than moving away from it. Against Atlanta, Clark finished with 26 points and 7 assists. Indiana battled foul trouble throughout the game, and the Dream attempted 31 free throws. Afterward, both Clark and Cunningham made their feelings clear in their own ways, and White later acknowledged that many of Indiana's fouls stemmed from players being late or out of position, issues that ultimately fall on preparation and execution. What do you think the Fever need to change to get back on track? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the latest WNBA news and biggest stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.